Well, good afternoon, NAC, and welcome to the NAC check-in chat. We appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon, and we think we've got a great program for you. So without any further ado, let's break into it. First of all, I'd like to let everyone know that on June 30th, that will be the next edition of the NAC check-in chat. And information and free registration for that session will be out soon. I'd like to remind everybody to please stay muted during the calls, but we absolutely encourage you to ask questions. So please use the chat function. You'll see it below to ask any questions. And either our guest, Larry, or myself will repeat your question and answer it for you, or at least do the best that we can do. As been the custom on the NAC check-in chat, we've got a few announcements, and you'll see a new one on here. We've got an online CCM class that's available right now. You can go to naconline.org and find the registration information out for that. The term does start on July 6th, so you only have a couple weeks to register, but please take advantage of that. I think you'll find that the course is very enjoyable, and the price is actually very, very reasonable when you take into consideration what's all involved. I would remind everybody if they could please mute their call. I would appreciate it. Another reminder, CinemaCon registration is now open, and NAC will have a slate of events that will happen at CinemaCon, and I'm going to get into those a little bit more in detail in just a little bit. And I'd like to unveil our new show look in the lower right-hand corner, but I want to remind you all to save that date, October 27th through 28th. Hyatt Regency in Dallas, the Concession and Hospitality Expo is back. And we're gonna have some general education sessions, a one-day trade show. We're gonna do all of our awards down in Texas that we would normally spread out during the course of the year. We're gonna have some evening social events, and there's also a 4-day CCM class that's associated with Expo, and that's leading up, that's in the few days leading up to the Expo at the same hotel. Now just for a few more details on NAC at CinemaCon. The dates are August 23rd through 26th. The first thing I'd like to tell you is we did not feel comfortable having our charity golf event this year. And so we're not going to have the traditional charity golf event. However, our golf chairmen have done a great job in securing a golf opportunity for those who would like to play on the morning of August 23rd, that's Monday. Tee times for that are starting at 8:06 a.m. And the green fee is only $59 per person, so really good deal on golf. So thanks to those golf chairmen, and that'll be at Desert Pines Golf Course. A little bit different course than we're used to, but also very convenient for getting back to the hotel for the rest of CinemaCon. If you're interested in that, please visit naconline.org or contact me directly, and I'll put you in the right direction for getting a tee time and playing golf on Monday morning. We've decided not to have any Sunday committee meetings this year due to travel restrictions and budgets and so forth. And that includes, we will also not have a board of directors meeting. We will have an executive committee meeting on Monday afternoon. We will have an NAC booth on the trade show. So if you're at CinemaCon, it's booth 220 in the 220J. I think that's the Julius Ballroom. So make sure you visit us there. And we will feature a complimentary meeting room for our members. So there'll be a sign up for that shortly. So if you're there at CinemaCon, you're able to book some meetings. We have a meeting room for you. And it's very convenient. It's right next, it's just adjacent to the trade show floor. And then finally, and because this does refer to today's guest, Larry Etter, we're on Thursday morning of CinemaCon, we're leading our NAC seminar To Infinity and Then Where? Facing the Future Requires 5 Fs. And that's Larry Etter is going to head that up along with a star-studded cast of operators and suppliers and distributors. And it's going to be very interesting as we go forward. So make sure that if you're out at CinemaCon on Thursday morning, stop in for that seminar and look for more information to come. Now, I know I talked a little bit about the NAC Conception Hospitality Expo. And again, I want to show off our new show look. We just got that finalized about a week and a half ago. And I did want to let you know that there are going to be trade show booths available, and there are going to be sponsorship packages available. If you're interested in one of those things or anything to do with Expo, please contact me. My contact information is up there on the screen, and you can find it on naconline.org as well. And probably also appropriate this time to let you know that you can contact me, but you can bet that I'll be contacting you to gauge your interest and try and get you all down to Texas and get things back on track. And maybe that's a good way to segue into today's program. We've called it Buyer Behavior in a New World, the cues that support buyer confidence. And our guest today is Larry Etter, CCM, NAC's Director of Education, and he's the Senior Vice President of Malco Theaters. And the way this kind of started was, as we've been having these calls, we've had operators report an increase in per caps and some other maybe strange things that we didn't know were going to happen. And Larry and I have been talking about this off and on as we've been working on other projects. And it just so happens, Larry, I believe you've done some research on this topic, and you're going to share that with us today. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much. And I want to say hello to all the folks. I kind of see a lot of friends that are in the lobby kind of participating today, and I want to thank them, first of all, for giving us their time. And then share some outside views of, I think, what really has been happening since about this time, 2020. You know, Chris, you kind of introduced the fact that as we discuss things among ourselves, we have noticed that there's been an increase in per capita spending. And I personally saw or witnessed that, and it was a little bit unusual because those of you that have been participating in these check-in chats for the past year will remember one of the first guests we had was Rob Lehman with Santikos. And what Rob basically was telling us is, as they reopened their theaters in June or early July, they took a different strategy, and that was to have a single price for a drink, a single price for popcorn, and without saying it, somewhat discounting the prices and concessions to maybe encourage people to purchase more. And just from the Malco perspective, we followed that suit, and we ended up with a $5 large beverage, a $5 large tub of popcorn, and we offered a number of candies at $3. But what I noticed was, with the decrease in attendance, we actually had a high, and the decrease in prices, we had at least a 25% lift in per capita. And what that would, well, why did that happen? That was my question. And so I, throughout the summer and early fall, was helping our theater employees clean auditoriums. And one of the things that became apparent was there was less and less smuggling. And I don't know if my colleagues in operations in theaters noticed the same thing, but it was somewhat of an extraordinary experience, because we're, in the theater industry specifically, we're known for smuggling. And it's okay, or it's perceived as being an okay behavior for patrons to bring in their own food. In this particular case, over the past year, that has declined. And so that piqued my interest, and I wanted to find out more. So I asked for some support from the University of Memphis to help guide me a little bit. So as I tried to do my own research, I wouldn't get off kilter and start making up, bias or prejudice sort of reports. So in doing so, we also invited the employees that work in all of our theaters to fill out a questionnaire and tell us what their feedback was. Were they seeing the same thing that I was seeing? Because I wanted it verified among the entire theater circuit, not just what, the few theaters that I was visiting during the pandemic. And it turns out that I was pretty much correct, that there was less smuggling, which meant the follow-up question then is, well, why? And so we'll kind of discuss a little bit of that now. And that's kind of what the overall process was for me. You can see me right there scratching my head, asking the question, well, what happened? What's changed? And then the next question really is, have we really learned anything? And I think the first thing that we learned is that the fear of disease has become a very real occurrence. And that fear can be witnessed in a lot of different locations. We're talking about amusement parks and movie theaters and stadiums and arenas, but specifically it happened in churches and in grocery stores. It was across all the retail environment. And so from that standpoint, COVID-19 really awakened the reality that germs and viruses are deadly and they're not to be dealt with lightly. And I think maybe for the past 50 years, we've taken our health and our standards and our sanitation somewhat for granted. But I think this true fear created a kind of a different buying pattern for all of us. As a matter of fact, part of the research paper that I did, I also discussed panic buying. And I think a lot of the folks that have crossover businesses that are with NAC, for example, the confection industry, the snack industry, saw huge increases in purchases. And part of that is panic buying. People were afraid they were going to be stuck in their house. So they collected as much toilet paper, they collected as much paper towels and candies and snacks and ate more. And so I think that panic buying syndrome boiled over or moved actually into the concession operation as well. So I think that when people started going back to the movies and started the people that were actually willing to take those risks were actually spending money more than they did before. And part of it is they had more discretionary income because of the reduced travel and vacations and those kinds of aspects. But the reality is there was a change in the buying habits. And so that was the question, how did that happen and why did it come about? And what were some of the factors that might have created that other than just pricing? So that's kind of where we started the thought process. So those of us in the entertainment channel, it's been apparent that for hospitality facilities to continue to operate and exist, we have to internalize and understand that the patron is actually taking a risk when they support our venues or our facilities. Movie theaters, as well as hospitality venues and public entertainment facilities, had to be perceived as safe and clean. There was a paper that I referred to, and I will continue to refer to. It was written by Mangini, Vincent, Zara, and Anita in 2020 that kind of went through these processes, and I'll discuss it more as we move forward. But the landscape of doing business is going to be different as we go forward. Chris, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. We were talking about hotels, for example. Currently, if you travel during the pandemic, hotels opted not to come in and clean your rooms if you stayed multiple days. In other words, the people that were staying in those rooms felt safer if they knew no one else was there. The question now becomes, what happens after the pandemic? Will hotels continue to operate under that premise and basically only clean your room once you check out? And is that the right kind of service, or is it going to be different?
Larry, I think you used the example of also, going to a restaurant and using a QR code instead of being handed a menu.
Yeah, and so we're going to see those kinds of changes. And I don't know about you, Chris, but that kind of bothers me a little bit. Call me old-fashioned, call me grandpa. I like to hold a menu. And even if it's just a laminated menu, I think there's something, I don't know the right word to use, but enjoyable about discussing the different menu items at the dinner table with my friends or colleagues or family. And when you have a QR code, which I don't know how to operate, I have to take a photo, and then I'm looking at something, and maybe I'm looking at appetizers, and my wife is looking at desserts. I don't, it's hard to kind of change, but it's possible that those kinds of things that have been created in the entertainment hospitality industry never change, and they'll stay that way. What is the impact? Well, after going through the research, a couple of the things that were uncovered were, one was the loyalty factor, and the individuals that were still going to movies, even under reduced occupancy and with less prominent films being released, they were really, really loyal customers. Okay. And so, were there any subconscious influences that were affecting their experience? That was question number one. Is there something going on here that we don't see that's not out in the forefront? We all know that the impact on privately held businesses, family-owned businesses, smaller facilities, they were at higher risk and more vulnerable because they had less cash flow, and they were not necessarily prepared to make some of the changes or adaptations based on what COVID had done to the business. There are a set of tasks that leave specific impressions of deeper sanitation or reduce risk. That's really what I'm trying to say is, how did we, or can we reduce risk in a facility or create more of a sanitary kind of environment without making it a hospital? So what are the means for improving the perceived cleanliness? And that's really what this all sort of boiled down to in this research. So it kind of reminded me of a seminar that we put together at NAC back in 2014, which was called Building the Experience. And in that particular seminar, I really stressed on first impressions and what did people think of when they first saw you. And there were, in that seminar, remember this is pre-pandemic by at least 5 or 6 years, 7. There were immediate cues that people use. And researchers and psychologists say that people will make 11 decisions in less than 7 seconds about your business. And so what are those cues? And so as I go down this, when I stressed it the first time, I thought the first 3 decisions that people make were extraordinary because it didn't have anything to do with money. The first 3 are all based on safety and sanitation. We as humans, when in our own subconscious, when we look at something, the first question we ask, is it clean? And then we ask, is it safe? And then we ask, is it fresh? And note, none of these have anything to do with finance or our ability to pay or purchase anything. The next 3 actually start to talk about finance. And so it's affordability or the value. What is the value proposition? Is there variety? So again, they're kind of in categories of 3. Then after that, they ask those interesting kind of questions specifically for us in the entertainment business. Is it fun? Is it entertaining? Is it new or unique? Is it reliable? In other words, can I trust this product? And will it be the same every time? The number 10 was, is it kind of up to date, specifically more with technology? And then finally, will I give it a try or will I buy it? So here are 11 decisions that are made in less than 7 seconds prior to the pandemic that we all made. And guess what? I don't think that has changed. I think the 3 leading categories, the 3 leading aspects are still about cleanliness, safety, freshness, and sanitation.
Larry, it's probably fair to say, though, that they've intensified, correct? Because you said, those first 3 factors aren't about money, but they're very relevant to the times we're in.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what this rolled out into as it was exposed. It is that people went from feeling comfortable to feeling a little bit skeptical. And so now it has, in fact, intensified. And so, people are now more aware, I think, of what those safety standards are when they visit entertainment facilities. You know, we're talking specifically about movie theaters, but it does hold true with you know, every entertainment venue.
And then just a follow-up question. I don't mean to interrupt you, Larry, but just a follow-up question then. Is there possibly an unintended benefit to all of the protocols that we're having to go through in our entertainment venues then as we're going through this? Is that possibly one of those explainers, if you will, about why you're seeing per caps go up?
Well, I think so. What I'm going to touch on that here in just a few seconds. I think some of the things that occurred builds into what I'm going to talk about here in just a minute or two, and that's a new term that I came up with or borrowed, and that was experience-scapes. What are some of the components that are taking place, or that we as operators can introduce, or it became more apparent with smaller crowds, if that makes sense? And so let me just get through these slides here, and I think you'll see kind of what I'm talking about. But to your point, yes, Chris, you're correct. I think it was exercised more during the pandemic than what we had seen in the past. We were aware of it, we just didn't like use it, if that makes sense. So it really, you know, this slide right here says that in the beginning, before the show even begins, we do form expectations or some impression that we expect to get when we attend. So we shape every impression by our actions. And the best way to manage those subconscious influences is really through this term that I came across, and that was called experience-scapes. In other words, what we're really doing in the entertainment venues is we're creating, we hope, we're creating an escape from reality. And I think movie theaters as a whole have really perfected that measure. So for example, when you go to a movie theater, you're going to get a higher presentation level than you would at home. And while we've created, or we can purchase 60-inch screen or 90-inch screen televisions, LED, you know, and it's great for your home. You don't get a digital projector, you don't get laser projection, you just don't get the same presentation that you do in a movie theater. The same as with the sound. You can have a great sound system in your home theater auditorium or room that you have at your house, but it doesn't match anything like Dolby surround sound or Dolby Atmos Dolby Atmos recliners. You know, theaters have, the process here is that movie theaters have worked on creating an experience that can't be replicated at home. One of those things that we were challenged with was seating. And so we've created these recliners now. And so now you get the very best presentation, you get the very best sound, you get the very best in seating, and then we added adult amenities. And I think that's unique in that we've started to market more towards the adults and what they like. I can't imagine an 11-year-old going to a movie theater asking for a spinach salad. Okay. I can see that we're offering things that pizzas that fit all the demographics, chicken tenders fit all the demographics, burgers fit all the demographics. And so we've now kind of settled into, you know, a little bit broader menu. I think going forward, you're going to see those broad menus trimmed down to just a few core items. I think we found that 80% of what our sales are on menus now fall in that 3 categories that I just said. We still always will have sodas, we'll have popcorn, we'll have candy and confections, we'll have the sweets, but then we'll have some other items such as pizzas, chicken tenders, and burgers. Most of the other stuff will go away. So that's really what we had been working with kind of pre-pandemic, the reality or the escape of reality. But now we have this term that I kind of brought about called experience-scapes. And so what are experience-scapes? And this is where things started to change for me when I started doing this research, because I immediately thought that we were dealing with a more honest group of individuals that were coming into the theaters. In other words, they weren't smuggling, they were buying our food. But why was that? And in truth, we'll talk about that in just a second. But there were eight categories that have kind of been developed on what we're describing here is experience scapes. One, the first one is degree of lighting. Two is the presence of plants or greenery. Three, shiny surfaces. Four, aroma or scents that fit the complex. I'm going to talk about all of these a little bit more in depth in just a few minutes. Fresh air and circulation. Two, the presence of a cleaning staff. Employees wearing latex gloves. That's really my short way of saying protective garments. So it could include masks, it could include face shields. There are a lot of things that we can do that indicate we're aware of the transmission of bacteria or germs. And then finally, food presentations and packaging. And I think those two things are going to have an impact, but these are things that really affect kind of the subconscious awareness of what we're doing in a particular building. On the screen, those of you that are viewing the screen, you can see on the upper left a welcome mat. And in the upper right, you can see a red carpet. And this is really what I'm trying to point to here is there's a difference. There's nothing wrong with a nice welcome mat. There's nothing wrong with a fantastic hi, thanks for coming to the theater. But there's something different about a red carpet than there is a welcome mat. And people have a tendency to veer towards the higher end amenities because it exhibits value proposition. In other words, I'm going to get more if I go down this red carpet. It's going to be a little more elite than it would be so through just basically the welcome mat. All of these things sort of bring back trust and loyalty. And what we found through the research was there is a direct correlation between loyalty, honesty, and trust. Those three words fit almost like a glove. And so the individuals that were still coming to the movie theaters in September and October, November and December, even though there was limited access or limited occupancy, they were the ones that were going to be more loyal, more honest. And I think we saw this in theaters, stadiums, arenas, zoos, whoever was open, we did see that. This really fishtailed really nicely with the other research that we had done in 2019. And that was, what are people thinking about first run films versus streaming? And one of the characteristics that we uncovered is that people will not give up their movie theaters. They feel like the movie theater is a part of the community, almost a landmark, very much like their library and their city parks, and they don't want them to go away. And what we learned was that the people that are going to movies were buying more in the concession area as a way of giving back to the theater so they might not close or create less stress. I don't think they realized what our bills were, but we appreciate all their patronage. Anyhow, every guest comes to one of our facilities with an experience, a proposed expectation. And so it's our objective to continue that trust, to build that trust, and it fosters loyalty or more purchases while they're at the theater. So if you remember the 8 attributes, one of the very first subconscious cues that we can give our customers when they enter the facility, one of the first things that was discovered was bright lights. And what it really signals is a bit of transparency. It signals trust, because the operation is really exposing itself and showing what it has to offer. Now, the reason I kind of started to find this interesting is because, as all of us know, when you went to a movie theater in September, October, August, pick a month back in 2020, there were less people in the lobbies. And when there are less people in the lobbies, some of these other characteristics become more apparent. And so when there aren't crowded lobbies, all of a sudden things seem to be lighter because there's fewer shadows, I'll say it like that. And when you have less shadows, less crowds, you can actually see things. In other words, you can see the facility is dust free. You can see that the facility doesn't have trash on the floor. You can see that the trash cans aren't overflowing. You start to notice things that look cleaner, safer. And so bright lights is one of the first subconscious cues that people pick up on immediately when they walk into, our facilities. The next thing that we really came to understand was greenery and live plants subconsciously, they suggest freshness that may not exist in other facilities. So I think we've all been to those places where we've had artificial plants that are covered in dust. And that gives us kind of a negative impression on cleanliness and sanitation. But in this particular case, the subconscious mind automatically assumes, oh, they're green plants, they're water features. They'd love to hear a little bit of water flowing. It settles the nerves. It makes people feel more comfortable. It suggests freshness, which then relaxes people enough to where they open their wallets and they start spending money. The third piece that I found really interesting were shiny surfaces. And it really intimates cleanliness, but it indicates maintenance and sanitation. And I know, my visits to our theaters on Friday nights or Saturdays when we have blockbuster films, I don't remember what that was like, but when we had blockbuster films, the lobbies would be crowded and you really didn't see the stainless steel that was polished or notice other things. And what I'd say to, my colleagues that are listening, some of the best things we can do is to, have employees out in front of the building polishing the glass, but maybe even more so, wiping down the door handles. I'd never trained anybody to clean door handles, but I'll tell you this, if I was walking into a facility and I saw employees polishing the glass and wiping down door handles, I would feel safer. And so those are some of the other subconscious cues. Other subconscious cues that we already knew about that just came to light in a stronger way with this experience-scape kind of strategy were aromas and scents. Aromas and scents tend to excite the memory of past positive or negative experiences. And so, we assimilate with movie theaters the smell of popcorn. And, if you walk into a facility or even if you're in the parking lot and you can smell the popcorn pop, and it makes a huge difference in the freshness kind of aspect of what we do in cinemas. I can say the same thing with cotton candy. If you're in an amusement park and you smell the cotton candy, I don't know if you do it, but I subconsciously just walk in that direction, Chris, just because it smells good. I want to be around it, if that makes sense. Onions, same way. I know here at the Ridgeway, when I leave at night, sometimes I can step into the parking lot and I can smell the onions on the grill cooking for the burgers and stuff that they're doing next door. And it excites my senses. So that's kind of cool. And I remember.
So Larry, just
go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, Larry, in these 4 factors that you have up here, the greenery and live plants and the shiny surfaces, was that a matter of trial and error, or were those things that already existed that you maybe just brought more to the forefront or paid a little more attention to?
Well, it really wasn't anything I did. It was the reading and the research that I did to try to figure out what is creating this positive interaction with our food service operation. Why were people buying more? So, for example, if I was selling, let's just say I was selling sodas at $10 a pop, and I dropped the price to $5. For me to get back to my regular sales per capita, I'd have to sell twice as many drinks as I did prior. Okay, so I would have to have 100% increase in purchases. And so not only did we have 100% increases in purchases, but we had 25% past that, if that makes any sense. And so something was giving people a reason to buy more. So my first thought was, well, we have shorter lines, okay? And so people don't feel like they have to wait in line, they can grab their stuff and go, okay? That was my first indication, or my first guess. And there was probably some of that. But I think when the spaces are open and cleaner and it's more available, that it's accessible, people start to notice some things such as the shiny surfaces. So when I was doing the research, I came across this whole study that was done on subconscious cues, things that we notice subconsciously that we don't necessarily talk about. That makes sense?
Mhm. Yes, it does.
So
Thank you.
I thought it was kind of interesting that this kind of parlays into that trust and loyalty factor. It just kind of builds into that. And so does that answer your question? Does that help?
It does. Thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, and I put the last piece down there with garlic. I know a lot of people don't like garlic, but I remember NAC had a convention in San Francisco and they took us to the ballpark there. I think at the time it was AT&T Park, and they were famous. That venue was famous for creating garlic fries. And I'm telling you, when you walked into the ballpark, you could smell the garlic, and it just made everything different. You know, I mean, it was very unique to that facility. If you didn't like garlic, maybe you shouldn't go to see the Giants play. But it was apparent that they were playing off of that aroma and scent kind of aspect. Parlaying more into that, trust equals loyalty kind of factor. There are the other 4 visual cues that are somewhat subconscious. A cleaning staff. Anyway, a cleaning staff indicates sanitation is a priority, and they're going to maintain the building. Again, I put latex gloves, but I mean more definitively protective kind of wear, so that people feel like they're guarded and they're protected from cross contamination from other germs that might be in the air. What's really kind of unusual, I think, is that we in the industry have been doing all of these things for a long time. But I think the pandemic, what it really did is it brought it to the forefront on how important it is, and we should stay focused on some of these key areas, such as, again, lighting. Green plants indicate freshness. Latex gloves are protective clothing. I personally am against latex gloves. I'll tell everybody that's listening right now, the health departments have proven that people that wear gloves are less likely to wash their hands ever. They feel like their hands are protected, and so they might touch some ketchup or mustard, and because it's on the glove, they'll then pick up something else. The next thing you know, there's a lot of cross contamination, as opposed to if you didn't wear latex gloves, if you got ketchup or mustard on your hands, you're more likely to go over, wash your hands off and clean it up. A lot of times people wearing latex gloves, they bend down on the floor and pick up trash, throw it away, and then go back to making pizzas or whatever they're doing. So me personally, I'm not in favor of latex gloves, but that's not my call here. What we're really talking about is the subconscious cues that humans have. And subconsciously, people think that if you're wearing gloves or mask, it's a safer environment. Food packaging, again, it suggests less cross-contamination, and it suggests that there's less risk. It's a safer product to consume. We've always had, specifically in the food and beverage industry, we've always tried to be artistic, and we've always tried to create, that value proposition again with, overflowing popcorn falling onto the floor, a huge basket of fries where fries look, they're falling on the floor again. All of these things are aspects where we've tried to use food packaging as a means to help sell. I think what we're finding subconsciously is people want to know it's safe and secure. So will they buy their nacho chips in a bag, a 3-ounce bag that's closed, as opposed to, freestyle pulling chips out of a chip warmer, putting it in, a container or a tray, and then adding cheese to that. I know that, we made some switches during the pandemic where everything we had was packaged. Packaged cheese, packaged chips, packaged jalapenos, and we basically let people build their own nachos for that matter. The question is, will that continue as we go forward? Will we roll it back a little bit? Those are questions that we'll have to decide. But subconsciously, people, are very protective about their health. They're gonna be interested in that. And then air circulation. This became a part of the CDC regulations, and they talked about transfer of germs through the air. I don't know how many of you have ever walked down a street and all of a sudden there was a stench, whether it was a sewer or garbage, but you wanted to get away from it as fast as possible. And so air circulation and temperature controls are subconscious cues to tell people that it's safe. Having said that, I kind of am repeating myself a little bit here, but these type cues demonstrate that the management is following CDC guidelines. Hence, it's again building another trust factor. And when the research is finally completed, those of you that know anything about research or do any research know that every time you do a study, you find out that there's some prejudice or bias in what you're looking at. And then two, you also start to ask more questions because the more you discover about certain aspects, the more you want to know about other aspects that didn't get covered. And so, this whole thing about Experiencescapes came about because we were looking at, what is the loyalty factor? Why are people buying? How do we increase the trust of our patrons so that they believe that we're doing everything to make their environment clean, safe, and unobtrusive for that matter. So kind of brings us to what goes next, and will there be frustration ahead? I think there will be some frustration. I don't know exactly if we'll go back. One of the things that I didn't mention or even research, but I'd like to research is the factor of cashless businesses. I know a lot of facilities, recreational facilities such as sports stadiums, the Memphis Grizzlies. If you go to a Memphis Grizzlies game, there's no cash. You either use a credit card or some advance payment or something like that. You're going to pay with your phone. The Memphis Redbirds, the AAA baseball team, no cash. You can't give a $5 bill to your 13-year-old and say, hey, go get a hot dog. A funny story, Chris, if you don't mind me telling this. I was sitting next to a guy at the Redbirds game just recently, a couple of weeks ago, and he gave his kid $5 to go get a hot dog. And he wasn't even thinking about it being cashless. And so the kid came back with a hot dog, but he said, hey, Dad, they don't take cash. And the dad said, well, how did you get the hot dog? And he said, well, Miss Sarah, at the concession stand basically said if I gave her the $5, she would buy it with her credit card. So that led me to ask the question, did the hot dog cost $5? Did it cost $4? I mean, did she keep a commission? But that's an example of how things are going to change going forward, and what does that mean subconsciously? So there'll be more studies to follow, but I do think that we're entering into an era of good feeling. And Chris, you and I had kind of talked about this a little bit when we were kind of setting up this meeting, but in the 1800s, 1825, President Monroe was president of the United States, and a Boston writer was questioning the president about the future, and he said they kind of coined the phrase the era of good feeling, because it's described as a national mood of positivity, and I think that we're going to enter into that. I'm hoping that the loyalty factor that we've seen in theaters at this particular point continues, because it certainly has paid off. I'll tell my colleagues they're on the line, we have Bargain Tuesdays, and our current per caps right now are anywhere between 45 and 60% higher. In many theaters, it's actually double what the per capita was before the pandemic hit. I don't want to see that go away, and that's based on those loyalty factors. And how do we transition as we start to get busy again? Will people continue to spend the money that they did in the past? And will these subconscious cues or factors play into that at all?
When do you think that you start to run into diminishing returns as far as behaviors start to regress to the mean, or maybe the more streamlined menus start to level off or even decrease per caps? Do you have some kind of feel for that, Larry, just based on your experience?
Well, I can't speak for all my colleagues in operations and theaters, I can only speak on what I think we'll do at Malco. I do think we're going to roll back. I do think that we gave it a try. My own studies, my own research shows there's not a lot of profitability in putting in extra stainless steel and fender hoods and bigger menus and trying to drive the price up, the revenue stream up. Yes, we do. I'm not going to argue with anybody about increased spending or revenues on the food service side with these bigger menus. But what I will argue is that there's no more profit made by doing that. And so I do think that we're going to settle in with a couple of key items that I've mentioned already, like hamburgers, chicken tenders, pizzas. I do think those are here to stay. And those things do build on the menu a little bit. They do cannibalize hot dogs and maybe pretzels or some other items such as that. But I do think that those items are here to stay. Did that answer your question? Did that kind of fit a little bit?
Yeah, I think it did. And I'd like to ask another question that goes back to the middle of your presentation, but you had made the statement that family owned and smaller facilities tended to be more at risk. I'm not sure, did you hint at why that is? Is that a matter of resources or?
Yes. And so when I was digging through some of this stuff and trying to find other, other individuals and maybe their perspectives on some of this, one of the things I came across was the fact that smaller entities typically don't have cash reserves and they don't have stockholders that they can lean on for cash calls when they get into difficult situations like this. And so they're more susceptible for, closures and, being more aware of some of these things. So when the pandemic hit and there was this great fear and there was no money and the building is closed, they didn't have cash reserves to pay the landlord, to keep their leases up, those kinds of things. And so they were impacted much more significantly than, say, the bigger companies that had better relationships with their landlords or, vendors and so forth and so on.
Yeah, and I also think, that in the news recently, the Small Business Administration, some of the aids are being held up too, which, people are starting to get pretty nervous about because it's cash that those smaller businesses really need. And so right. Let's hope that those things open up. Larry, I'm going to work. We didn't rehearse this one. Okay. So I'm going to just throw you a fresh one here. We use the term the era of good feeling, which proves that, yes, Larry and Chris did both go to history class in high school, but I guess this is my question. And it's a personal one, but I think everybody will appreciate your answer. What are you looking forward to in the next few months?
I think the one thing that I'm looking forward to the most is getting back into a conversation and discussing operational efficiencies with my colleagues. That's what I'm looking forward to the most. I haven't met, a salesperson in person in, over 18 months. It's really hard. It's funny. I asked somebody, I'm looking for a collector's cup for a summer promotion that I want to run in August. And I haven't seen a sample in, 18 months. People, all of that has kind of dried up. So that would be, the typical way we do business and how we try to innovate and invigorate, our employees. How do we incentivize, our customers? All of those things are kind of instrumental in keeping the business running, as a forefront. And I really miss the relationships with, our colleagues in manufacturing and suppliers and the innovation that takes place within, our group. And I miss that the most. I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to the most. The more I think about CinemaCon, the more I'm getting excited about seeing, all of our colleagues and talking about what can we do to, add value to going to movies again. That's really what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to NAC in October, to be honest with you. I can't wait to get back with the folks and talk about those issues and hear from other folks about, what their trials and tribulations have been, what their successes are, and how we can kind of parlay that as an industry, work together.
Well, thanks, Larry. I think a lot of people would agree with you about what you're looking forward to. I know I certainly do. I am not seeing any questions on the chat, so I think I will just go ahead and wrap things up today. But thank you once again, Larry, for your time and your overall contributions to NAC as far as research and looking out for us in terms of our training and education.
Yeah, Chris, I'm happy to do it. I want to be sure to remind everybody, if I can, about the CCM program that we're still running online. That's one of the things that I do miss, Chris, is the interaction with the students. Everything's been done virtually. Starting July the 6th at the University of Memphis, they have a new program where when you register, you're actually registering through the university itself. So if anybody, on this podcast has friends that want to do this, just let them know if they register, they're actually going to get 3 university credit hours that they could apply. And probably, I can't guarantee this, but they could transfer to whatever their local university is and get credit, going forward if they wanted to continue their education. So I'm kind of excited about that, but we're running out of time here. July 6th is not that far away. We need to hopefully get more people to register for that upcoming summer season.
And they can visit naconline.org for more information, or look in some of our other communication channels, such as our social media channels, our NAC weekly newsletter, for information on that. If you can't find those, or it's not in your daily habit to visit those, drop me a line, drop Larry a line, and we will we'll get you lined up to register for the CCM class. I do want to remind you, Larry mentioned it, but CinemaCon registration is open, and CinemaCon is something I'm also looking forward to. I spent some time talking about somewhat of a truncated schedule for NAC, but I think we're just happy to get back and roll up our sleeves and get back to work, as Larry mentioned. So if you have any questions about that, you can also certainly contact me. And then also time to start thinking about the Concession and Hospitality Expo on October 27th and 28th. We'll have a lot more information coming out about that. We'll be contacting you about registration, about sponsorships, about trade show booths. So be looking for those things. And if in the meantime, if it comes to mind and you want to drop me a line or give me a call, I'm certainly open to talking about that with you. But again, things are looking very, very positive going into the second half of the year, and let's hope they continue that way. So,
hey, Chris, can I ask the audience a question? Because these people,
sure, go ahead.
I see a number of the people may have, kind of a good awareness or an opinion that would be valued for the NAC staff. We've kind of been approached by Cine Europe to conduct a CCM program in Spain in October, the first week of October. And I really have, limited experience in what is going on in Europe, and would they want a certification program, put there. Both the Sunshines think it would add value, and it would give those folks an incentive for attending their show, Cine Europe. But I'm not sure how it really translates. So if anybody that's on this this call right now, this meeting, would like to give us some input, I think we'd appreciate anything. We're not in a position where we can just go out and start doing things because one person suggested. But if it's viable, we need to do things like that. So if anybody has any opinion on that, I'd love to hear feedback from folks that are doing business in Europe, have colleagues there that might.
Okay, I would invite folks to just email you or I with any type of feedback they'd have on that, Larry. at this time. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Information on that will be coming out real soon. You've been watching Check-In Chat. It's a production of the National Association of Concessionaires, where food meets fun. Thank you, everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye now.